Hi, welcome to this ITT webcast on lesson planning for the Cambridge CELTA and the ITTC Certificate in TESOL course. And hopefully by the end of this little webcast, you'll have a better idea about how to complete the lesson planning document and how to plan your lessons with logical stages to help build up to achieve your aims. There'll be a lot of information on the screen at various points, so please feel free to pause the video to read the screen. And also we'll send you some documents to go with this, so there'll be some handouts and some information that you'll be able to use to help you plan your lessons from this point on. Okay, good. Okay, so let's have a look first at the language lessons. This is grammar and vocabulary. So we're not looking at receptive skills, reading and listening lessons yet. We'll look at those shortly. So this is language lessons for grammar and vocabulary. And we're going to have a look at some stages that you can start using to plan your lessons. You can always change these and change the order and do your own lessons. However, this is a good place to start to give you a good understanding of how a framework can build up to achieving your lessons. Okay, so sometimes we would begin a lesson with a lead-in. We want to get people interested. We want to set the topic, set the context. Then we might present some language, some grammar or vocabulary by putting it into context, helping students understand the meaning, the form, the pronunciation, how it's used. Then we might build up some practice. So give them some controlled practice to make them a bit more confident with the language and to see if they've understood it or not. And we could build up so they've got more freedom until they're using the language to express their own ideas and opinions and experiences. And of course, we're going to have feedback. And feedback would go after all these stages as well. So these might be the stages. So we'll have a little look at the procedure now and see what people might do in these different stages, what the teacher and the students might do. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So this is the procedure. It's in the wrong order. The stages are in the right order. Let's see if we can match the procedure to the stages. So the lead-in. Okay, if you'd like to pause the video, see if you can find something in the procedure that matches the lead-in. Okay, so hopefully you found this one where we set the context or the theme of the lesson, generate interest and warm the students up. So that would be something that we do as part of the lead-in. Okay, if you'd like to pause the video, have a go at matching all the other ones and I'll show you the answers in a second. So just pause the video and have a think. Okay, good. I'm glad you're back. Right. Here, this would be what people are doing in the lead-in. Set the context and theme of the lesson, generate interest, warm the students up. Then we want to present the language, so the particular grammar or vocabulary that's the aim of our lesson. And we'd present the target language. That's the language area that your whole lesson is about. So we're presenting it to the students through a context, maybe a story or a text or pictures. But then we want to check that they've got the meaning, the form, the pronunciation, and how it's used. And then we can build up the level of practice. So if you'd like to pause the video just to read that. Okay, good. So that's a framework for a language lesson. There are different ones and you can be very flexible, but this is a good way to start. Now let's have a look. We're going to contrast it with the receptive skills lessons. That's the reading and the listening frameworks. And so we've got a little metaphor, a little mnemonic to help you remember the difference between the language lessons and the receptive skills lessons. And the receptive skills lessons we think of often as a burger, and the language lessons we might think of as a dress. So I'm going to give you the stages now of the two, and this is on your handout as well that we've sent you. If you'd like to have a look and see if you can match, that's it. See if you can match these stages to where they would come on the lesson. So for example, the receptive skills, we would begin with the lead-in, and the final task that we would do might be an extension task. Again, see if you can put the other ones in to the different stages, and with language focus, there might be lots of these as well. Okay, have a go at that and pause the video and we'll come back and have a look at the answers in a moment. Okay, good. So This might be the receptive skills framework. So we've got a lead in. So this is letting us know that it's a burger, letting us know the topic of the lesson. We've got a language focus. Maybe we need to pre-teach a little bit of vocabulary so students can understand what the lesson is about. Maybe there's a prediction task, so students predict the answers to some questions or predict the content of what they're going to listen to. Now, the two main meaty bits of this lesson, the two big meaty tasks, these are the reading or the listening tasks. And that first one's going to be quite general, maybe for gist, and that will allow them in the second meaty reading or listening task to go into a bit more detail. At each of these stages, we might focus on a little bit of language that comes out of the text or the task. And finally, we might have an extension task. So this is the bottom bun. Without this, the lesson all falls down and makes a mess of your shirt. But the bottom bun is the extension task. So this would be where students react to the text, where they talk about their own feelings about what they've read or listened to, and also extend it into their own lives to personalize the lesson and the language and the text and the topic. Okay, now that's receptive skills. Let's move on to the language lessons. The lead-in, then the presentation, a nice tight focus. So we're thinking maybe about the amount of language and freedom that's being used here. The lead-in, we want students to use lots of their own ideas as well so we can see what they're already doing. The tight language focus, we want to restrict so that we can help them and make sure they've understood the meaning, the form, the pronunciation, and the use. And then we're building up the level of freedom and the amount of language being produced from the controlled practice up to the freer practice, which has got lots of nice frilly touches with all the students talking about their own lives. Okay, so they're the main stages in the framework if you're asked to teach a reading or a listening lesson, or if you're asked to teach a grammar or a vocabulary lesson. And sometimes there might be a mixture of both, and sometimes your lesson might be the receptive skills, and then the following teacher might use that text that you've helped students understand, use that as a context for their target language. Okay, you'll be discussing all these ideas with your tutor in guidance as well. So let's move on and have a look at the actual lesson planning document. So we'll go through the different stages and just give you a few tips about what you need to do. I think the first part is quite self-explanatory: name, date, class, lesson length, room, tutor, materials. Now, these we'll come back to in a little bit more depth in a moment. The learner aims and outcomes. This is very important. It's what the students will be better at by the end of the lesson. The personal teaching aims, well, look at the feedback that you've had on your previous lessons and then decide what you want to develop as a teacher. Assumptions, this is about what the learners can already do. So if you're doing a lesson on present perfect continuous, perhaps you're doing that because you assume students can already use the present perfect simple. It might also be about interests. It might be about skills and abilities. Okay, anticipated problems and solutions. This is very important at the planning stage because if you can anticipate these, you can plan your solutions so they don't become a problem. This is a chance for you to show your tutor in Cambridge that you've thought about all these things when you've been planning your lesson. We'd like people to think about either language lessons or the receptive skills lessons. You don't need to complete both these sets of anticipated problems and solutions. The anticipated problems, it's good to write down possible errors that learners will make. So, for example, with pronunciation, don't put down the correct pronunciation here. Put down how you think a student might mispronounce it. And then in the solutions, decide how you can help them. Will you show the mouth position? Will you use phonemes or any visual help? Will you drill the correct pronunciation? So this is a good way to show Cambridge and your tutor that you've thought about this when you've been planning your lessons. These are the anticipated problems and solutions for skills for reading or listening. So are there any issues with the topic? Maybe if the text is about nightclubs, but your particular students are from a culture where there aren't any nightclubs, then that might be a problem because they don't have any opinions or knowledge about them. Is it about vocabulary in there? Background knowledge, activities and materials. The other part is the language analysis, which we'll look at in a moment because that's very important. The board plan, particularly if you're using the whiteboard, you can put down how you expect your board to look by the end of the lesson. Or with the interactive whiteboards, you can actually print off any pre-made flip charts that you've already done at the planning stage. And then the final part of the lesson plan is the stage plan. So how much time things will take, what the stage is and what the students and the teacher is doing. What's the interaction? Is it students working together in pairs? Is it open class with the teacher talking to the students? And what are the stage aims? So why are you doing those particular activities and how do they build up to achieving your main aim as well? And we'll be looking at these more complicated areas in a moment. Okay, so let's have a look at the language analysis. In this part, we'd like you to look at the language items that you think you will focus on. Maybe put it into a context sentence. If it's from a context, use that context in your plan. So if it's from a reading or a listening or from an example sentence, use that so it's the same context as your lesson. You can put on the meaning, the form, the pronunciation, the use. You could think about how you're going to convey meaning, get the idea across to students, and also check that they've understood it. But don't worry about doing the checking yet until you've had sessions on checking understanding. So if you'd like to pause the video now, I've put a little sentence here. I would like to go out tonight. Have a think to yourself, maybe make a note. How would you mark on the meaning, the form, and the pronunciation? Okay, have a go at that now. Pause the video and we'll have a look at the answers in a moment. Okay, good. Right, so let's have a look at the answers. So you might annotate this. So we've got the sentence, I would like to go out tonight. The meaning is just want. I want to go out tonight, but perhaps the use means it's slightly less direct. The form, well, the important thing here, I think, is that it's would like, but then it's the infinitive with to. So I would like to eat out tonight. I would like to stay in tonight. So students need to know that this is the to infinitive. And the pronunciation as well. I would. So we've got silent letters there with the O and the L, or perhaps the contraction I'd. And like to go out? No, it's like to go out tonight. And these are the stress markings as well. I'd like to go out tonight. So that's just an example of how you might do some language analysis on meaning, form, pronunciation, and possibly use. Okay, so again, there's going to be quite a lot of text in these sections. So if you'd like to pause the video so you can read these, that's a great idea. Okay, and the first one are the learner aims and outcomes, and this is what learners will achieve by the end of the lesson. We're going to have a look at two good sets of examples here. They're worded slightly differently, and we might choose the first one. But let's have a look at those now. If you'd like to pause the video. Okay, good. So this is by the end of the lesson, what will students have a better understanding and command of? And this might be a lexical set or a group of words and vocabulary. It might be that they can make suggestions. It might be that they're better able to understand and use the present perfect simple. This is a very nice way to do it because it's quite concrete. It's what the students will be better at by the end of the lesson. So it's student-centered. But you could also possibly word it like this with these infinitives if you prefer. I'd just like to pause that and read those now. Okay, so they're the main aims or outcomes. Let's have a look at some of the other sections of the lesson plan. These are the stages. So this is going to be very important as what the students are doing. I think it makes it very clear for you as a teacher when you're planning your lessons to have stages which are labeled and underlined, and so you can see at a glance where you are in the lesson and where you're going. So here are some examples of some stages you might use, some stage names. Lead in, presentation, focus on form, guided practice, feedback, prediction. It's a very good idea to include pair checks and feedback in your stages so that you don't forget them because they're very important. And also you can put some detail in about how you're going to do those stages. So if you'd like to pause that and read this. Okay, and the stage and the activity, so you need to put down what the teacher and the students are doing. So for example, if you'd like to pause and read this, it's fine to use some abbreviations if it's very clear. So feedback is FB, T is teacher, maybe S or S's might be the students. That's fine as long as it's clear. Okay, and in the next part, the stage aims or the reasons. Now, this is very important. If you understand how your lesson builds up, why you're doing different activities, you will have a very good understanding of the lesson as a whole, and you'll be able to be in control of that lesson. So if you'd like to pause that and just read this about the stage aims. Okay, good. So let's have a look at some of these stage aims. So I've put some examples here. What I'd like you to do now is while you're reading this, have a think about what the different stages are that these aims are appropriate for. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these stages and stage aims. So to activate background knowledge and existing language, or to generate interest in the topic, both of these might be stage aims for the lead-in stage to the lesson. To raise awareness of meaning, form, or pronunciation, this might be a presentation stage or a language focus stage. To clarify meaning, form, pronunciation, or use of the target language, again, that might be a language focus stage. For feedback as well, and pair checks, this is a very useful thing to think about why you're doing feedback and pair checks. And it might be to provide positive reinforcement of students' good use of target language, or clarify any errors as well. Okay, we'll turn over again to the next page, and there are some more stage aims, and I'd like you to think about the stages. Okay, so if you'd like to pause this video and have a think about the stages for these aims. Okay, and it seems quite obvious, but a listening for gist, maybe the first time they listen to something, the aim is to provide practice in listening for gist. Maybe a detailed reading, a second meaty burger, the second reading task. The aim might be to provide practice reading for detail. So sometimes it seems so obvious that it's unclear, but actually, no, that's good. Put it down. Put down why you're doing those stages, and then you should be able to see at a glance the staging of the lesson, and also why you're doing it, and that the stages logically build up. And if they don't, if you're not clear about the stage aim, maybe there's a problem with the lesson, and we might need to rearrange some stages, or to think about how we might do the activities differently. Okay, and so the last part here, we might look at this one. This is the interaction pattern. So if you'd just like to pause that to read this. And then finally, let's look at some ways to do this. So if you have T, 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 T all the way down your interaction column, your lesson is probably far too teacher focused, which means the students are less engaged, less motivated, they're doing less. What we like to see is lots of S's or S's here, so that we know it's a student-centered lesson. But also you've thought about the differences between the stages to provide lots of interaction and vary this, so there's a nice variety and balance in your lesson for the students. You don't need to write these out in full. You can use these little abbreviations as well. Okay, so that's the end of this podcast. I hope it's been helpful. Again, if you've got any questions, speak to your tutors and have a go. So you can start thinking about your next lessons and have a go at using the planning documents to complete your lesson plan. Okay, good luck.